So, welcome to Let's Thrive and Shine Beyond Belief, the podcast that is targeting leaders, entrepreneurs, and business owners. I mean, how to tap into some of those areas where we might have a little bit of self-doubt, or for some of us that don't recognize it, that are tripping into burnout, or potentially wearing that mask and trying to pretend you're something that you're not. And ultimately, maybe limiting you from thriving and shining beyond belief, because so many of you are so much more that you can do, but we do limit ourselves sometimes. And that's why we've got amazing guests like Sam Garrity. Now, Sammy, well, she's an incredible lady. She's got so much to share and amazing information that she does day in, day out. And she's learned from her own experiences. And we were only just talking about that just now, about, it doesn't matter how experienced you are in this area, you still fall into the cracks and trip over yourself and then realise that you're actually doing some of the stuff that you're teaching. So anyway, without further ado, Sammy, please introduce yourself.
Oh, Keely, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me. I love that we can come live to each other across the world, with you in the UK, me in Texas. And it's just brilliant, isn't it? Just so good that like thousands, hundreds, millions of people can connect just with one little Zoom call. I love it.
Yes, the world is getting smaller.
It is getting smaller, it is for sure. I'm Sammy Garrity, as Keely just shared. Gosh, having built 10 of my own businesses and worked with over 70,000 entrepreneurs through all of our programs and resources and books and all of the things that after my burnout, I decided that I would do as a different route, because I was really serving my heart out in a very different way before. And God was calling me to go to a higher place and be able to serve in a bigger way and take what I know and help others grow. And so that was a very different journey for me, which I'm sure we'll get into on this call today. But yeah, that led me on a big journey. And so we built the world's largest brand building resource for entrepreneurs of purpose-driven businesses. That's now 10 years old. And again, that all followed my burnout. It's amazing what creativity you can come up with when you're not getting into the daily grind of the have to, must do, should do, the gotta monster. And so we did that. Then we built Brand Builders Club all over the world and was running events all over the world. Then lockdown hit and we lost it all. And then we built it all back up again online. And now we're in a season with the Impact Catalyst, which is the business that my husband and I have now partnered on. We've been running that and building that for the last year. We've launched our first book together, our 1 Year No Fear book, because we recognized that, we're talking about branding and building a brand and growing your business and expanding your reputation and turning your mission into something that really moves people, especially for coaches and speakers like us who really want to move people to action and want people to not just go away with a few tips and feeling good, but to go and implement them and do really good shizzle with it. So we launched our first book, 1 Year No Fear, because we recognized people were getting to the point of getting it all ready to launch, and then they'd start something else because they didn't want to be visible, or they didn't have the confidence, or they were in fear of what will other people think of me, the fear of judgment, fear of failure, fear of abandonment. What if people get out and walk out while I'm talking? What if you see that number when you're on Facebook Live and the number of eyes are going down, 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 and people get really hooked up on that. And so, we've written that first book as part of a series, and we're just having fun doing what we love, making an impact, which is a very, very different life to the one that I had when I was burned out, completely fried, totally depleted, and pleasing everybody and not myself. Me coming last, family coming last, everyone else coming first. So things had to change.
And it's an amazing thing, isn't it, that so many of us, where we're very resilient characters, we are those type that do like to serve other people because that's who we are. But it's having that fine line between serving others but also being able to protect yourself, because ultimately you can't drink from an empty cup. But the problem is we keep soldiering on, I mean, even when we have the bad days when we dip, we get back up again, we dip, we get back up again, we dip, and so on and so forth. And then all of a sudden your body goes, you're not listening to me.
Yeah.
And that's where it then crashes and burns. And that's why, for me, this is so important for you to talk about your journey, because so many, and I'm sure you find it with leaders, entrepreneurs, business owners, they don't want to recognize it, and not deliberately. They just think they're so flaming strong. And because they're spinning plates and they manage to survive everything, they cope with everything. We put, distraction, coping, all those kind of things. And they don't actually even know they're stressed or burnt out. I didn't know I was stressed and burnt out. So I'm sure that's the same with yourself, Sammy. So tell me about when you actually hit that point. I mean, what actually got you to that point in the first place?
Yeah. Well, like you say, to the point you just made, you don't realize that you're in it. And I think one of the blessings and curses of being an entrepreneur and being in business on your own, or being at a level in a corporate position where you feel like you have to perform all the time, or that other people are performing in a certain way around you, and you then think and feel like you need to perform like that as well. Like everybody's working late hours at the office, you feel like you've got to work those late hours at the office. If people are skipping lunch and they're working through lunch, and you end up doing that too. And so I think there's this peer pressure, and no matter where you are, and even when you're working in your own business. I had my own business when this happened. I was building my 5th company, and actually we were building those 5 businesses at the same time. Unsurprising now, looking back on it. Oh, burnout. How did you not realize that you were burned out? But I just was in the thriving of life. I was loving what I was doing. And because I was so buzzing about it and everybody wanting it. And, at that point we were building a branding agency. We built that over 7 years. Branding is my entire background. And building brands. So for 7 years, we were growing that. We were going to the opening of an envelope for networking. And my business partner and I said, this is crazy. Why are we doing all this networking? Why aren't we just taking, say, the 50 people that in our network that we can do really good business with? Like we find it very easy to refer them, and they find it easy to refer us. Why aren't we just getting them together in one room, and we'll just create a power team and we'll do that? Well, we started that in April 2007. And what was really interesting was I put an invitation out to the 50 people that I felt were a really good match. And usually you don't get 100% people turn up. Every single one of them turned up. And I remember on that very night, I stood back and I was just witnessing the juiciness of what was happening, because ultimately we were saying, look, we've got things in common. You and I are doing really good business together. We find it easy to refer each other. And we find it really easy to refer each other. And so do these other 48 people. We're finding it really easy to refer to each other. So why can't you be referring to each other too? There must be a synergy. So that's what we did. And I just stepped back and I witnessed the amount of networking and contacts and referrals and collaborations and joint ventures and partnerships that were coming out just out of that first meeting. And I stood back and I thought, wow, I'm the only woman in this room. I didn't realize every single one that I'd invited, they were all men.
Oh, wow.
And I had to take a really good look at myself, because I thought, why aren't there any women in this room? Like, I'm the only woman. And I realized how masculine I'd become. And I was in this masculine energy, striving, driving, pushing, shoving. And all of the men that I was surrounded with, they were like 10 times pushing, shoving, striving, driving. So I felt like I was doing my very best to keep up. So I was keeping up. Wow, that's how you build a multi-million business, right? I've got to do that. That's how they're acting. Okay, so I've got to do that. That's where they're going. So that's where I've got to go. And so we just were, it was a real kind of get shizzle done environment. And everybody was thriving. But if everybody also felt the way that I did behind the scenes, like, I don't know how I'm going to keep up with this, it turned into a business development academy. It was my first membership without me realizing it. Because after 9 months of running it, we were at a stage where we said that this is actually a business model. We've just done this for a bit of fun, and to get some business into our agency in an easy way, instead of having to go to loads of networks. Now we were doing one thing a month, and then just keeping in contact with the people that were great referral sources for us. And so we built that up, and within 9 months, that became a business development academy. Well, all of a sudden now we've got another business, and that's basically what was happening. We were doing loads of SEO work. People were coming to us. We were doing their branding. Then they'd get their website done. Well, then they'd want to get found on Google, because now they've got this brilliant website and no one can find it because no one knows about them. And so we partnered with an SEO company. Actually, even 18 years later, he's one of the mentors on my program now for my clients. And so then we had an online marketing company. So we had that as well. And then we had a social media company. And then we got into people development. And so we partnered with one of our clients who was working with a lot of manufacturing companies, going in, working with their team and their productivity. And we just started getting involved in too much, ultimately, because we were on a high and we were saying yes to everything, not realizing that every time we were saying yes to that, we were saying no to ourselves. We were saying no to our family. We got to a point where it was 2013, and I'd made a commitment. Fortunately, about a year before, I recognized, whoa, hang on a minute, like, this is crazy. I'm not seeing my family. Like, they don't even know who I am anymore. It's so long since I've seen them. And my grandma, who I was so close to, she was old. She wasn't getting younger. And I thought to myself, I need to start like pulling away from so much, so that I can say yes to my family. And so I started seeing my grandma a lot more. I was 4 hours away, because all my businesses were up in Leeds in the north of England, and she was in Essex. So 4-hour trips, but I was doing it as often as I could. But again, that put more pressure. Now I'm taking something away that was local, and I'm adding an 8-hour round trip to my day now.
Yeah.
So you're just loading it all. Now we've got family stuff. Well, in 2013, she passed away. And so that was a big year for me, really, because what she didn't know and what other people didn't know, because I was strong and no one was going to know about this, didn't want anyone to know about my weakness, was that I'd been admitted to hospital 4 times in less than 4 months with suspected heart attacks.
Oh.
And yeah, and you'd think that after the first 3 that I'd do something about it, but no, the 4th one hit, and I was just done. I was cooked. I was burnt. I couldn't do it all. This was just before my grandmother passed away, and as I was laid on the hospital bed, you know what it's like in A&E. It's just chaotic, isn't it? Bright lights, the smell, like noise everywhere. I was trying really hard to think. And the thing was, I had a pitch at 11 o'clock the next morning for a new piece of business. So all that's going through my head is about this pitch. I'm just laying there. I'm kind of ignoring all the beeping machine that I've got all these sticky pads all over my chest, and I'm just kind of ignoring that, thinking, okay, I'm running through the pitch in my mind. And the doctor comes in, and he just looks at me. Now, I'd seen him, plus there were different doctors, but I saw him the first time, and now he's coming back the 4th time. And he looks at my notes and he says, you've been in here 4 times, and he just has a chat with me, and he said, Miss Blindell, because my surname back then, I got married last year, so my name's different now. But so he just looks at this thing and he said, Miss Blindell, you've got to change what you're doing. You have to change what you're doing. And he looks at his notes again. He looks up at me and he said, if I see you in this room even one more time, I can't guarantee what you're doing to your body is going to be reversible. You have to change it. And he turned around and went to walk out of the door, and he turned around and came back to me, puts his hand on my shoulder. I don't know if it's the usual thing that they do, because fortunately I haven't spent much time in hospital. This was my only really experience of it. And he just put his hand on my shoulder and he just said, you're free to make your own choices, but you're not free of the consequences of those choices.
Wow.
You have to change what you are doing.
Wow.
And with that, he just disappeared. And I just laid there. And then I started really taking in what was going on. Okay, how am I? Like, yeah, this is the 4th time I'm here. And I started to really question what if I died right here? If I died right here, what have I actually left behind?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer shocked me, because it was nothing. I was working 20 hours a day for nothing. I had all the money but how do I spend money that I don't have time to go and spend? I had the beautiful house, I had the beautiful car, I had all those things. Amazing team with years building up a team, beautiful offices with all the glass, with all of our logos over it, you know, like you're really proud of. You're like, wait, we've made it, you know. But all those I made it moments, they meant nothing, did they? Really, at the end of the day, I'm lay there. I think if I die right now, my team, they'll just go find another job. My business partner might keep it going, he might not. All of the partnerships I've got, well, they'll just carry on running their side of the business. My family don't really know me anymore anyway. And I just felt this absolute, like a tidal wave of overwhelming, I'm feeling it coming up right now, loneliness. I felt so lonely. And yet I was surrounded by hundreds of people every week. But I'd never felt so lonely and broken. It's like, you know, when they say, oh, I was broken. I wasn't broke, but I was absolutely broken. And that was just like, what am I doing? The following week, one of my clients, Nikki Valentine, she that's a great name. I still love that name. How can you forget that name, right? So Nikki, she reached out to me and she said, Sammy, because she'd just started her we'd just done the branding and everything for her business. She was doing personal branding, like styling. And she said, Sammy, I'd love you to be a case study for me. Can I take you shopping? She said, I've got to come see your wardrobe first, and I've got to go through your wardrobe, and then I'll take you shopping. So we went to Meadow Hall in Sheffield, and we went shopping for the day, and we came back, and I was completely restyled. And just as we're going back to our cars, she says to me, Sammy, you know, you showed me your vision board earlier. I said, yeah. She said, there was a thing of Tony Robbins on there. I said, yeah, I've always wanted to see Tony Robbins. She said, well, you do know he's coming to London next week, don't you? I said, no. She said, oh, you better like go get yourself booked onto Tony's event. Like, it's in London. You don't have to travel anywhere. Like, you know, just literally a few hours down the road. I was like, oh, okay. So I went back and I booked it. And that was the first 3 days that I'd taken out of the business in about 7 years. Even when we went on holiday for 1 week the year before, we ended up with this awesome kind of holiday that I didn't get to enjoy at all, because the phone was ringing constantly the whole time we were there, so you couldn't switch off. And it was just like, oh my gosh. And so Nikki says, like, get to this event. So I take 3 days out. I drive down to London. I go to this big event that Tony's at. And he did a process while we were there, which was, I think it's called the Dickens process.
Right.
If you're familiar with that. So the Dickens process, long story short, is the first question with all the like really like atmospheric music to get you into the most emotionally like drowning place, basically. The first question: if you do nothing and you carry your life on exactly the way you're doing it now, where will you be in 5 years from now? And I just thought, wow, okay, so I'm not seeing my family. Do I even want to be in business anymore? I was questioning everything. After that doctor said that, I was questioning everything. Do I want to be in business anymore? Do I want to be doing this anymore? In 5 years, if I'm this ill now, will I even be here in 5 years?
Yeah.
And then they say 10 years. You don't change a thing. You carry on doing everything you're doing. Where are you going to be in 10 years? And then I started to kind of internally sob, you know, when you're like holding it back, which we're all really good at practicing that one, aren't we?
Yeah.
Really holding it back, tears flooding down my face, but I'm being quiet. I'm still taking it, you know, taking one for the team. And I'm just thinking to myself, wow, in 10 years, if I'm still alive in 10 years, gosh, if I'm still alive in 10 years, who am I going to be dependent on? Who am I going to be a burden to? because I won't be able to, at the rate I'm going, I won't be able to do things on my own anymore.
Yeah.
And that really hit me. Oh, no, that wasn't enough. 20 years. In 20 years from now, you don't change anything. You keep doing what you're doing, treating yourself the way you've been treating yourself, saying yes to everyone and no to yourself. You keep doing that. Where are you going to be in 20 years? Well, the guy that was stood next to me, I was on the front row. The guy to my right just falls to his knees and starts sobbing, like out sobs.
Yeah.
The guy to the left of me slumps back in his chair, and all the lights were down, but I can see this is happening. And I just thought, oh, 20 years. And, you know, I had this really strong vision of there was all these coffins going past me. It was like this procession of coffins. And it was all the people whose lives I was missing because I was working so hard. And the last one really undid me was my dog, Bonnie. And this tiny little coffin goes past me at the end. And I was like, I don't even have time to walk my own dog. My team were walking my dog. And I thought, wow, this has got to change. This has got to change. And then my grandma died. It was like the three things, you know, they talk about what happens in threes. My grandma died and I was done. I walked into the office, said, not doing this anymore. We were going through the process of selling the business for 8.7 million at the time. And I just said, have it. I don't care about it. Don't care about it enough. It's all yours.
Yeah.
And so I signed the paperwork, got my pound, and I walked away. And it was the best pound I've ever received in my life, because that for me was, right, you've bought your freedom. Now, that feeling lasts for about 5 minutes. Then the overwhelming, you go from overwhelming, right, got to make the decision. Then you make the decision, and then there's that period of peace. And then you go into, well, what am I going to do now?
Yeah.
But I knew that my next step was to rest. And so I went back to my parents, which was an absolute blessing, because not everyone has parents, and my parents live in France. So it was a very, very nice place to go to. I'm very blessed. I've always been very well looked after. God's always looked after me like that. And so I went back to my parents. But when you're so used to being independent, it is really hard, and you remember why you left in the first place.
Yes,
You
indeed.
go, okay, like my mum and dad, they are amazing, but my mum and I are two very, very strong women. And when you bring two very strong women under one household, that can have its own challenges.
Yes. Indeed.
I just remember in that first week, I just decided when I got there, I'm gonna juice. I'm gonna just have a complete reboot of my system. So I start doing this 7-day juice, and on day 3, it's like you know, when you go through the 5 cycles of change, the first cycle is woohoo, I'm doing it, and the second cycle, oh, this is a bit more involved than I thought it would be. The third is what they call the valley of despair. So on day 3, I hit the valley of despair. And I'm like, oh, couldn't stop crying. I felt happy. That was the crazy thing, but I could not stop crying. My mum comes in and she's like, oh my gosh, what's wrong? What's wrong? And I said, I don't know. I just can't stop crying. And she said, let me get you some chocolate. I don't want chocolate. Let me get you some wine. Mum, it's 9 o'clock in the morning. I don't feel like it. She's like, but I think it will help. It won't help. I just feel like this. Right. She went, I can't help you. All right, let me know if I can get you anything. And I just cried and I cried and I cried. And it was like my body, because I wasn't prepared to release it, because I didn't know how. Back then, I had no idea about these things. My body said, all right, if you're not going to do it, I'm going to do it for you. And it just did it, and it just released. And I actually ended up taking 3 months and nothing. And And that was a big lesson as well. Like, how do you do nothing? How do you do nothing when you're so used to doing everything? So yeah, I had to learn. I had to learn to do that. And I think that taught me so much about actually slowing down to speed up.
Yeah.
Because at that point, I was not at all in any way interested in setting up another business. That could not have been further away from what I had in my mind. But I started to have these little, I don't know how you would describe it. I know what they are now, but they're like, you have downloads.
Yeah.
You have downloads, and you think, oh, where did that come from? And they're, these little creative downloads. It's like, the heavens, the universe, the angels, God was saying, all right, I think you're ready now. You've had a bit, we've given you enough of a break. You're anointed to do this thing that you do. Like, you grow businesses really, really well. And there's a lot of people right now that need that. And I'm like, nope,
Yeah.
no, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm not ready for that. And I just kept saying no to it. And eventually the downloads were coming so much.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that's because I slowed down, because I didn't have everything else that was pecking at my head and everybody needing something or wanting something from me. There was none of that. And
Mm-hmm.
so I could hear very clearly the calling, and it just kept coming in. It just got stronger and stronger and stronger. And in the end, I said, all right, what does this look like? Because I'm not going back to running around like a crazy person. I'm not going to do that anymore. I need to do something that I can live here, because I've realized I quite like France. I quite like living here, and I'm in the middle of the countryside, 1 mega band of broadband. So I can't really do much. I've got to
Yeah.
slow down. And it was just, okay, so why don't you create a resource? Because there's lots of people that need to know what you need, what you know. Why don't you create a resource? Why don't you start taking what you know and turning it into some books and some downloads and some video trainings and maybe some podcasts? And so, okay, yeah, I could do that, because I can do it from wherever I am. Absolutely, I can do that. And so I started doing that. And within 12 weeks, didn't realize, but within 12 weeks, the momentum really, like the train had left the station. I just committed to doing something every day. I was doing about an hour every day. And the train left the station. Within 12 weeks, I had £18,000 a month coming in from a program that came off the back of my first book, which is behind me.
Yeah.
7 Reasons Why Customers Don't Choose You, and how you can change that. And that book then turned into a program. And I had 18 people sign up at £1,000 a month to go through that program for 6 months to massively scale and build their brand and become the person of influence that they were born to be and anointed to be. And I remember that first month of delivering it, and I'm thinking, wow, this is in flow. This is really easy. This is crazy. Like, I'm just working whatever hours I want to.
Mm-hmm.
I'm living in the beautiful French countryside. By that time, I'd found a beautiful, beautiful Longère cottage. So I had loads of land, just panoramic views of fields and farm, and it was just gorgeous. I thought, I've got 18 grand a month coming in. Our business before, it was costing us £23,500 a month just to open the doors.
Yeah.
And then we had all the staff issues, and everybody brings something to work, and like,
Mm-hmm.
you're just in that constant crazy loop. But here I am, like, in peace and in the graceful peace and presence of God, just creating from my heart and the things and my experiences that I already know. So I'm not having to do anything. This just feels too easy. And I've got 18,000 coming in a month, got no staff, got no one to answer to, only my clients. I'm just sewing into my, God, wow, I wonder if I could do that again. And so I set to creating a different product this time that wouldn't involve me. And again, the success rolling in. Oh, okay, I think I've hit on something here. Well, here we are, like 10 years later, and I've now created over 1,000 mini courses, masterclasses, resources, tools. We've built the world's largest brand building resource, and we run the Invincible Impact program, and it has just been such a joy as a journey. But still, when you start building stuff and you're enjoying it, those same old problems keep sneaking up. So the burnout started to come again when I started to get into the physical delivery again. I started to get too involved. And that was the real key thing that just kept coming up, was, why are you trying to be so involved in everything? God's not taking applicants for his position.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh gosh, and then lockdown hit. I felt like lockdown hit just for me, quite honestly. because we were only home for 6 weeks, actually sleeping in our own bed for 6 weeks of the whole of 2019, because we were launching brand builders everywhere. We had ambassadors, we were launching into different locations, we were running 34 live in-person masterminds every month, and I was there for most of them, other than Brisbane. When we launched there, I'd tune in on Zoom, and it was just crazy, and I really felt like I was back to where I was, and I started to get those chest twinges again. And I thought, whoa, like, time out, we need to do something different. And I was just thinking about how we could do it different when lockdown hit, and we lost everything, because lockdown, you can't run events when you're in lockdown. You can't be doing that. And so really, we were very lucky and very blessed that we had lots of members that wanted to continue with us in an online format, but most of them were like loving the offline stuff. And because the business didn't look the same anymore, they weren't, when their membership ran out, they didn't renew. And so we were having to look at a whole new way of doing things. And it's interesting that we built that up, and then in November we started to really get, well, actually it goes back further than that. So in February last year, so we're currently in 2024, so that would be 2023 February, Greg had long COVID, and because his chest was so bad, it was just getting to the point that, like, he was completely burned out from not being able to breathe properly, and it was really hurting his health, and he was just getting on the stronger and stronger antibiotics. At this point, he was on the strongest, and they weren't affecting him anymore. His body had become immune to them. And so we said, right, let's get somewhere warm, because we were living in the UK, sailing around on a boat. I said, so let's get somewhere warm. Let's see if that makes a difference. So we went to Cyprus for a week, and his chest within 3 or 4 days totally cleared up.
Yeah.
And was really good for about 6 weeks when we came back. We said, right, so we know we need to be somewhere warm or dry for winter. And so that was the plan. So we actually moved to Barcelona. And then in the November, we had to come back to England to sort some stuff out, and a member of the family had died. We came back for a funeral. And I think if we hadn't have come back for that, we would still be in Barcelona. Yeah. But we came back, and it was a Friday night. I actually saw you at an awards do the next day, didn't I? On the Friday night, I took the dogs out for a walk. I was out for about 10 minutes, came back in. But while I was out, I had this huge download. Why are you moving? And it was these exact words. Why are you moving to Barcelona? You got no business in Barcelona. You're not planning to do any business in Spain. So why are you moving to Barcelona? You know you're going to move to Texas. So why are you putting this in the way?
Yeah.
And I thought, well, no, we've gone so far through immigration. No, oh my gosh, no. Like, we've done too much. We've worked too hard to get to Barcelona. No, we can't quit now. We're just coming to the end of the process. Yeah. And so I poo-pooed it, pushed it out.
Yeah.
I get home, and about 10 minutes later, Greg said, I've got to say something to you. I just need to tell you this. We don't need to do anything about it, but I just want to let you know that this is a download I've had. Now, Greg isn't the sort of person that talks like that, right? So that in itself was like, you've had a download? Yeah. And he says exactly the same words to me. I said, when did you have this download? He said, about 10 minutes ago. I said, I had it 10 minutes ago as well. So it was like God was speaking to both of us at the same time. Yeah. Now, he didn't even believe in God. Yeah. So he was like, well, no, I'm just, no, he'd grown up in quite a religious household and was totally against it. I didn't grow up in a religious household. My family aren't necessarily religious. My grandma always she had a visitation from Jesus, and so she had a very strong belief. She was never, wouldn't say she called herself a Christian. Jesus didn't call himself a Christian either, but she was very much of the way of Jesus, like love, kindness, generosity. She was just the beautiful, exemplary example of that. And I very much hope that I took those best qualities of her on. And so it was really interesting when we start getting these downloads, and Greg starts like coming around to the fact that this could be God that's driving these downloads. And I'm like, well, maybe it is. It could be. I mean, God created the universe. We're getting all these universal downloads. Like, we're getting them from somewhere. And now we're getting them at the same time. This seems a bit crazy. So he said, well, you know what? speak to Barbara. Barbara's one of our clients in Texas. And he said, speak to Barbara. So I called Barbara and she said, well, I think you better get your butt over here. When can you get here? And I said, well, when you're free. She said, I've got nothing in my diary tomorrow. Why don't you fly over? So within a couple of days, I was booked flying over to Dallas in Texas. Within 5 days, we had the house sorted. We'd got a car. The process of immigration was underway. And she was like, well, you better get home and go sort it. So I literally had 3 weeks to come back and pack everything up. We gave it all away. We were given 8 boxes. You can take 8 boxes. All right. So we've got 8 boxes. If it can't fit in those 8 boxes, then someone's going to receive this. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, that's what we did. And Greg found a great company to bring our 5 animals over as well. So our 3 dogs and 2 cats flew on the same plane as us. It was like the whole family just arrived in Texas. And again, it just goes back, 2016 when I took on a new business coach. And the question he asked me was, look, I know you're not motivated by money, because that was the thing for me. I was so burned because when I was building those 5 companies, I was doing it for the money. I was doing it because everyone was competing. How much have you turned over this month? How much profit you got this month? There was always this competition. And so it was all about the money. So I was so burned out about money. It was almost like I'd become disgusted about it. Yeah. It was like I was repulsed by it. Yeah. So I'd gone the other way, and it was almost like money was chasing me because I was all about the purpose then, like purpose before profit, right? And so, because I mean, you get the rewards of the impact you make. Yeah. So if you're making a big impact, you can't stop the flow of income come in if you're focused on that. And that's where I was focused. And that was the problem, was I was so focused on the impact and not looking at like, well, all this money's coming in. What am I doing with that money? How am I looking after it? I wasn't, managing the money well. And so I got this coach on board, and he said, well, look, I know you're not driven by money, but what do you want your lifestyle to be like? If you're going to be making this massive impact, you need to benefit from it somehow. So like, go and get a photo, go and find something that, I suppose some tips are coming out of this whole thing. He said, go and find a photo, an image that sums up the kind of life that you would love to live. Go, just spend some time on Google, go and Google it and find a property that does that. I said, okay. So that was my first homework. So off I go. And I find this house. Now, because I lived in France and I loved France, I wanted a little French chateau. But I didn't like the weather in France where we were, because we were in Brittany. It was very much like Britain, which is very rainy. And so I said, no, sorry. So I want a French chateau in a warm climate. So I typed that in, and this house pops up. Now, this goes back to 2016. I kind of subconsciously went in that this house was in Texas. But I didn't take any notice of it. I put it on my screensaver. I've still got it on my screensaver on my phone to this day. So I put it on my screensaver, and it's kind of in my unconscious monkey mind. And all these years later, so I come over and I'm sitting with Barbara and my husband Greg, and she picks us up from the airport. We go and she takes us for lunch. And I said to her, Greg and I we are having these downloads, and we think that we're meant to be here. And she said, really? And so we're having this conversation. This is when we've just arrived. And she said, oh, that's interesting. Well, maybe this is your land. Maybe Texas is where you're meant to be. And I had this flash of, do you know what? I'm sure I found a house in Texas years ago. And Greg said, oh, that's the thing that's on your screensaver. I said, yeah. He said, see if you can find it. So I Google French style chateau, Texas, and it comes up in the top 3 results. The house hasn't sold. And so I'm like, oh my gosh, like this house is still for sale. I showed Barbara, and she said, that's in Grapevine. I said, yeah. She said, this restaurant is in Grapevine. You're sat in Grapevine. Wow. There's absolutely no way. No way. Like, law of attraction, that shizzle happens to everybody else. That doesn't have, like, no, I'm sat in a restaurant that's near that house. She said, yeah. And Greg goes, wow, that's pretty accurate, considering you can fit the UK 2.8 times just into Texas, and the States is very big. So it's like, you found a house that is like 10 minutes from this restaurant. So after lunch, Barbara drove us there. And we drove up the driveway and we experienced being on the land of this house. And that's what we're working towards now is, okay, when you know, all of this is really God's timing, and we're not pushing anything anymore. You know, and I've gone from being a, you know, old poo-poo about God, yeah, all right, you're going on about that stuff, to, yeah, do you know what? I think there's actually something in this, because since we said, all right, we're you know, we're going to carry on with the stuff that we're doing, but we're gonna start listening to you. We're going to start listening. We're going to start taking this seriously. And he showed me, after we've been out here 5 months now, and after about, it must have been about 6 weeks, I was out by we've got a beautiful property here and a pool, and I was out by the pool, and I was saying, right, okay, show me what's next. And he shows me these masterminds running all over the world, right? And I'm like, no. You know, the amount of times when we say no to God, like, it just ain't going to happen, right? He's going to get it eventually. So you might as well just say yes. And I've learned that I just say yes now faster. And so I'm like, okay, right, masterminds. No, we've been down this route before. I can't do that. No, I'm not going to do that. I'm sorry. Like, I want to, all right, if we are going to do that, then you have to show me a different way of doing it, because, like, I don't want to burn out again like we did before. And it's incredibly lonely when you're the one that's burning out, trying to feed everybody else. It has such a lonely, hard way of doing things. And so he showed me, he said, but you don't have to be there. Where you missed the trick before was you were training people to do that. Now, why don't you work with people that already know how to do that?
Yeah.
They don't like the technology. They don't want to fill the event. They don't want to fill the mastermind. They just want to show up and be in their brilliance. Oh, that's interesting. Now that is interesting. Okay, thank you. I'll percolate on that. And so what we're doing now as the Impact Catalysts, and we're rolling it out, we've got our first 2 happening in the next couple of weeks, is we are partnering with business coaches and speakers who want to make an impact in their local community. So to build a big brand locally as well as internationally, because all the press will pick up on that, and to work with business coaches that already have all the qualifications. So we're not having to do any of that. We can just partner with them. That coach just wants to go in, build their brand, do a great job, support people between the masterminds, but they've never maybe run a mastermind before. We've run them all over the world, and there are different ways to run them. And so, I've really been shown the strategy for the victory. Work with business coaches who want to do that, want to make an impact. We're going to take care of all the technology. So we run all the ads, we create all the videos, we've done the sales page, and we 50-50 partner with those coaches so they can be building a business in their area. We get to be making a bigger impact, and we're not doing it for the money. All the money that comes in, we're just putting that straight back out into ads, because I believe that there are too many lost, lonely, and overwhelmed small business owners that are sat there feeling the same way that I did, completely lost. Just, okay, what is my next step? I can find every step on Google, but what's the next right one for me? And I think there's something magical about bringing a group of people together in a physical live location where you can look someone in the eye, and you can, like we did with those events, when we got all those people at that event, and there were partnerships and strategies and everything like flying around the table. The energy was just off the charts. And so, we are now going to do that. And I've been shown we're going to run 100 masterminds every month in the UK and 1,000 masterminds every month across the States. So we're now looking to partner with coaches and speakers who want to build their profile and want to build it locally and really give back into their local community and have a social impact as well as a financial one and a brand one. And so, it's been a journey, but those lessons about burnout and mental health, they just keep coming up. And you keep, it's like a little wall that you keep walking into every now and again, and you just remember, but it's like that conversation with God. Okay, I'm seeing you want me to do this, and you showed me this years ago, and I started doing it and it burned me out. I can't go back there again. You've got to show me a way that I can do this without having to be the one that does it. And I think when you ask those questions, it's almost like with Google, you're going to get the answer you type in. If you're not asking a good question, you're not going to get a good answer. And also what I've learned, another little tip, I haven't even gone into the tips yet. You asked me to give you 3 tips. I haven't even touched those. But another little tip is that for those of you that believe in God or whatever your higher power is, right? Whatever you call it.
Yeah.
I call it God. And so what I found is when I'm asking for something for myself, it's like you're pleading. That's like praying. I'm praying for this. But when you say, Father, show me, I want to be your hands, your heart, your feet, your voice. I'm your vehicle for whatever it is that you want to use me for this lifetime. Show me what is my next best step for you. And as soon as you are doing it for something greater than yourself, that's when the brakes come off. That's when the flood of information comes through. That's when the visions, or you start hearing it or sensing it, or you might feel it. I see it and I hear it. But that's where it starts to flood in. So if you're watching this and you felt stuck or overwhelmed, or, I'm just like, oh, what's my next step? Masterminding could help with that, because then you're not trying to come up with it on your own. But that's the kind of earthly plane stuff. Make sure you're also connecting to your higher power, the higher purpose, because when you're asking the right questions, you'll get the downloads, you'll get the answers, but you have to be quiet. You can't be in burnout while you're getting those answers. No. Because you've got to be healthy. You've got to be ready. Yeah. Sometimes we pray for things that we want, and when we don't get them, then we say, well, God doesn't exist. But what if he's actually saving you from the catastrophe you were about to create by trying to push something before you were ready for it? Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah. Sorry, that was a very long story short, but it has been a journey, and hopefully you learned some things from that. The tiny bits that it's a bit wild talking it out loud, actually.
Well, and honestly, I mean, one, thank you for sharing your journey, because it is such an important message, because it doesn't matter how resilient you think you are, you're not. But it doesn't matter how successful you are in a business, whether you're a CEO, an executive, I don't care what you are, you're still human, and you're susceptible to burning out. And if you're not listening to your body, then you will crash. And I think the biggest gift that you got, although I don't watch all the Tony Robbins stuff or anything like that, the biggest gift you got was in that moment, as hard as it may be, because it's a question I asked my clients, is like, if you're doing the same thing now in a year's time, how are you going to be feeling in a year's time? If it's, in 5 years or 10 years, all those kind of things, and most of the time the answer would be, well, actually, I don't even like to think about it, because I'll probably be in a coffin, because they're that bad, where they are in their space. And I think that's the thing, Sammy, is that it gave you that opportunity to just go, as that it was a massive wake-up call. And as you say, you hear, the men around you dropping one by one and sobbing and sobbing and sobbing, because it was finally the wake-up call that they actually needed. And even then,
at some point, something happens.
Yeah.
And there's a shaking and breaking. Yeah. But I just think that I know you don't recognize it when you're in it. That's the challenging thing. So it's important to have people around you that can reflect it back to you, and to not be offended when they say, hey, have you realized, like, you need to take a bit of time off or whatever, to not be offended by that, or to not feel judged. That's a really key part of this, but to reach out to people that you trust and say, hey, look, I know that I've been down this road a few times before. I want you to remind me. If you recognize that I'm going down any of these routes again, I want you to remind me about that. And you know, and it's important to have people that you can trust, like you with your clients.
Mm.
You're that mirror. They're paying you to be the mirror. They're
Mm.
investing in you to be that mirror for them, because especially, you know, when you get to the top of what you're doing and you don't necessarily have someone above you, or in a corporate position, you have maybe one or two people that are really above you, but you're still in charge of so much, you're still managing so much, that you don't want to look like you've got a challenge or that you're overwhelmed, because those people that are looking up to you, they need to see someone strong. And you don't want to look like you're folding to the people above you, because then you feel like you could be replaceable.
Yeah.
In a business sense, it's the same thing, because you either build team or you build clients. And
Mm-hmm.
so now your clients are looking up to you. You don't want to show weakness because of
Yeah.
that. And you've got nobody here.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're taking it all on your own, and you're like this sponge that's just absorbing. And at some point, you are going to get wrung out.
Yeah. Yeah.
But how, I think it's like, how do you know? I think it's important to know what your burnout process
Yeah.
is, because everybody's looks different. And it's
Yeah.
important, like if you've burned out, you can, you know, just take 15 minutes to journal it, right? You don't have to spend hours journaling. If you give yourself 15 minutes, it will take 15 minutes. You give yourself an hour, it will take an hour. You give yourself a lifetime, it will take that. But
Yeah.
give yourself 15 minutes and just plot back, like what signs, what symptoms, what were the
Mm.
things that I was ignoring in the lead up to that big bang,
Yeah.
so that I can recognize what they are if it happens again.
Yeah.
And so that's been very helpful for me, because I get to recognize when that's happening.
Mm.
And you know, and it's always, when I get burned out, it's always because I've got in the shoulda, woulda, must have to,
Could've. Yeah.
you know, for other people. It's
Yeah.
always about other people. Whenever I feel that way, it's always that, because
Yeah.
I've said yes to too much. So, you know, it's saying yes to the right things.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's somebody used an analogy once, which I thought was an excellent analogy, where you're pulling you've got the bow and arrow, and you're pulling the arrow back, and you feel like, oh, I'm going back, I'm not going forward. But
Mm-hmm.
in that period, in that season where you're going back, what you're doing is you're creating tension, you're
Yeah.
creating momentum. So while you feel like taking a rest is not doing what you should be, and you're not getting further ahead, and you're getting into the whole like your brain's not switching off. But whilst you're in that mode, you're forgetting the fact that as soon as you let go, you are going to fly at a momentum way faster than you could have done, than if you were trying really hard to get to the result. So we
Yeah.
have to pull back. We have to
Yeah.
pull back. And when you are pulling back, stop kicking yourself over it. Just say, oh, I'm pulling back today.
Yeah. And
Because
it's
you know
funny, I was actually talking to someone yesterday, and that was exactly it. You know, she castigated in herself because she hasn't done this and she hasn't done that. And, you know, I said, look, do you know what? You've got up this morning.
Yeah.
You've got up, you know, and if it means that that is hard work, well done you for getting out of bed. You know, you've taken your kid to school, you've done some washing, you know, you've done so. Just because you're not running at 1,000 miles an hour doesn't mean to say that you're a failure. It means that, you know, you needed a rest, you needed time out, and you've got to listen to yourself. And when we don't listen to ourselves, listen to our body, because as you turn around and say, you know, one of the things I always say is that recognizing your key indicators for stress, whether it is your neck ache, your arm ache, your brain fog, you know, the memory loss, you know, can't sleep, brain going at 1,000 miles, rashes, stomach aches, you know, the list is endless.
Yeah.
We see all these things in isolation, but it's not. It's gradually building up until they all sort of join together as one. As it goes back to that, you know, like, you're not listening. You're not listening. I'm shouting and screaming. I mean, it's like
I'll stop you somehow, and it will always be physical how it stops you, because it's the only thing that can.
Okay, and then sometimes, as you tend to say, it can lead to heart attacks and ultimately death. Your insides shut down because they can't cope anymore. And actually, it's quite like, You know when you go on holiday, and quite often when you've got the individuals that are running at 1,000 miles an hour, the first 2 days they're dysfunctional, and then
Yeah,
they then start feeling better, and then they're then dreading going back into work, so they start not enjoying the end of the journey. So when
that's
you do start,
true.
like you, I shut down in 2020, which is when I got made redundant. It was nothing to
Mm.
do with the redundancy. It was like a whole life of crap that I'd been doing to myself. And it was
Yeah.
like you were saying, it wasn't until I just stopped, slowed down. I went out walking my dog every single day, walking, doing the gardening, doing yoga, meditation. And the silence stopped inside my head. And it's so magical when it happens. And you're so much happier as well. You actually,
And that spills out.
yeah,
I guess it's also, when you're in a high profile role, and even if you're the cleaner, you're in a high profile role.
yeah,
Like what you are doing is creating a result that makes people happy, that
yes.
helps people to live better, right? To live cleaner. Like everybody has a role, doesn't matter what your role is, but just remembering that your role has an impact, and how you do it has an impact. And whilst you're just like I was looking at everyone around me, go, oh, but they're working late hours, I have to work late hours. They're skipping lunch, that means I need to skip lunch, right? And so you start modeling behaviors. Well, what if you, watching this right now, are unconsciously showing behaviors that other people are copying and modeling, thinking that that's the best way to do it?
Yes.
That just because they're modeling doesn't mean they're modeling success.
No.
It's something that Barbara said a couple of where was that? A couple of days ago, we were at dinner with her, and she said, a lot of people, most people, they get on with their life and they're doing what they do. And you might be, she said this to me, she said, you might be the closest face to Jesus that they ever see. You might be the closest thing to Jesus that they ever feel. And, when we talk about Jesus, I don't mean it religiously. I mean, as an embodied example of somebody that just had so much faith, that
Yeah.
was walking a walk of faith, that was welcoming to everybody, kind to everybody. Doesn't matter what religion they are, what faith they are, you love them anyway. Doesn't
Yeah.
matter what journey they've taken, you love them anyway. You love them through it, right? Sometimes you can love people back to life. And she said, you might be the only face that they ever see, or you might be the only example that they ever have of somebody that's walking right. So walk right,
Yeah.
and that for me was, walk right.
Yeah.
And what does that look like? Well, it
Yeah.
doesn't look like rushing, and it doesn't look like pushing, shoving, striving, driving.
No.
It doesn't look like that.
No.
And we don't want to create a world and be a model and an example of a world that does.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
we get to change it. We get to be the change we want to see in the world, and the ripple that we
Yeah.
want to.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and I know that's a phrase both of us use heavily, is that they're creating a ripple effect around the globe. Because as you turn around and say, is that, and it is the insanity of it, when you're in that office scenario and you've got, Joe Blogs, they're staying till 6. Well, I better stay till 6 because they're staying till 6. And they're having exactly the same thought, going, I've got to stay till 6 because Keely's staying till 6, or 8 or 10. And that's the insanity, because you're so focused on what everybody else thinks of you rather than
Yeah,
going, my
yeah,
hours are these
yeah.
hours, I'm going home because that's what I'm paid for. And I don't mean to say that you don't ever go the extra mile, because the reality is we all do in everything we do in life. But as you say, setting those boundaries, because you give an inch, they'll take a mile, and they'll stretch it,
Absolutely.
and they'll stretch it, and they'll stretch it. So lead
Yeah.
by example. If you want to show up as a great leader, lead by the example that you want to be seen as, not as
Yeah.
you think someone wants you to see you as.
I find that a lot of that is driven by fear.
Yes.
A lot of it is driven by fear. The fear of what you'll lose, fear of success, what will happen. Like for me, that fear of success back then was overwhelming, because I knew what success cost me. And so I had, from that, I then had a fear of success, because I had proof and evidence and a shining example of what that success cost me physically. And so, you know, that fear of success, fear of judgment, fear of failure, fear of loss, there are so many. I mean, back in 2016, this was something that I was really curious about. It's like, why is it that, you know, we have hundreds of people coming to our events, and yet some of them make it and some of them don't? Like, you know, when they leave the event, they've all been taught the same thing. They've all committed to do the thing they're going to do. So why is it some people do them and some people don't? And they're just not even accountable to themselves. So what is it? And so we ran a survey, and we had our partners send the survey out as well. And so it went out to over 60,000 entrepreneurs and small business owners. 41,000 of them responded. And it took us 7 years to go through the research. And ultimately, all of the fears, like it was all fear. Everything that came back, it was all of it was fear. And no matter how they dressed it up, you could see where the fears were. And it came down to, we were really surprised about this because there are so many fears. And we were really surprised that it just kept coming down. Like I say, it took us 7 years to do this, but it kept coming down to 12 fears. And so we called them buckets of fear. 12 buckets of fear. No matter what fear they said they had, and we hear a lot of people say, oh, I've got a fear of public speaking. Well, no, you don't have a fear of public speaking, but you have 7 of the 12 fears that are working, that are operating underneath that fear of public speaking. And so when you say, okay, well, one fear is enough to take you down, and you've got 7 of the 12 around that particular issue, that's going to bring you down. Like, is that going to help you move forward? Is it going to help you to be the best model of success in your company or in the company that you work for? And so that's why we put all of that research in place. We took all the research. We did a 1-year experiment last year. And that was fascinating. We had people that had fibromyalgia. Their body had created fibromyalgia to protect them from the fears that they had, from the fear manifesting as an actual thing in reality. So their bodies created an illness to protect them from it. It was phenomenal. When they realized what the fears were, gone. No therapy, no, you know, having to go to hospital, no operations or anything. Just knowing the fear is there and realizing how irrational it is. It was just, I mean, the brakes were off. And that's why after doing that 1-year experiment, we turned it into the 1-year no fear book. So we've got the 12 fears in here. And then we've got the tests in here that we were doing with those people that went through that experiment. And we actually talk about some of their stories in here as well. So you'll see yourself a lot in the stories through here, especially those of you that are burning out, you'll see it. And it's really interesting because we've had people that have said, oh, well, I haven't, out of those 12 fears, I've got that one, but I haven't got that one. And then they go through the test and it's like a, 0 out of 5, 2 out of 5, 1 out of 5, 0 out of 5, 5 out of 5, 0 out of 5, 2 out of 5, 3 out of 5. And it's the 5s. And you go to that 5 and you read that and you go, okay, where's this happening? When did it happen? Is it happening now? No. When did it happen? When I was 3. So have you got a 3-year-old that's running your career and your business right now? You've got a 3-year-old that's getting into your car and turning the ignition on. You've got a 3-year-old that's having all your sales calls, that's having all those panic attacks when you're about to stand on stage. That's your 3-year-old. When are you going to let that 3-year-old know that it's okay now? You're an adult and you've grown through all of those things and you're not on your own anymore. Oh, yeah. Oh, that is completely irrational. You see their careers take off. I've seen businesses take off. It's just been phenomenal just seeing. And that's what I'll give as my freebie. If anybody wants, not the physical version of the book, but if you want a downloadable version of the book, quite happy to give that away for any of your people that are watching this. So you could do the tests and work out what is it that is holding you back. And there's a whole, actually, it's a program. It's an online program as well. So we've created an online area that has hypnosis audios, visualization audios. I've created some mantras that you can walk to. And, you know, if you've got a certain fear coming up, like fear of not being worthy enough, that's a huge one. So you start feeling that, you go online, you click on that audio and you walk to it, or you do something where you're moving, and you won't have that fear will not be in your body anymore. By the end of that 10-minute audio, you'll feel ready to go, ready to get out there and do what you know you do best, that you're anointed to do. And we want to make that available to hundreds of thousands of people on the planet, because I believe that fear is costing people a lot.
Yeah.
In every aspect of their life. So if we can work out what that is, it releases and accelerates in every area.
Yeah. And that's beautiful, because ultimately, everybody, like I started out from, is that we are all limitless. And we don't have to be, you know, in that state of lack all the time, because the state of lack, it means that you're taking it away from somebody else. And we don't need to take away from anybody else, because there's plenty to go around.
There's plenty to go around. And actually, the slower you are, there's more of you to go around, which doesn't sound right, but it just happens that way. There's more of you to go around.
Slow down to go fast.
Yeah. Slow down to speed up.
Yeah, excellent. So honestly, Sammy, this has been an absolutely amazing discussion, and I'm glad that you could be open and vulnerable with me. I think it's a beautiful thing to be able to do that. And it's important. We know that when we are having those emotional moments and we do let it out, we're processing it, and it's good to process things. It's important for us to do that. So thank you, Sammy, and thank you for everybody that's listening. And you know, if you've enjoyed the show, then please hit the subscribe button, and also share this, because all of the information that Sammy has just shared is so important for everybody that's out there. Let's create that ripple effect, because we're all limitless. Let's all thrive and shine beyond belief together. Thank you, Sammy.
You are welcome.